Hi friends, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for tuning in today. This is another Draw With Me video, and this time we're going to be creating this cute little witch together, and we will try to create this pencil children's book illustration effect. This video is perfect for intermediate to advanced Procreate users. If you're a beginner, I also suggest you stay on, as you can learn quite a bit of tips and tricks on how to work in Procreate. Let us create a new canvas. This time we're going to be working in Square. This is perfect for Instagram uploads and other digital illustrations. I will be using a certain color palette for my witch. You can use your own colors, but I will be also linking all the hex codes in the description below. Besides, I will use some of my favorite brushes and the brushes I usually work with. They will be linked also below, but they are just kind of a version of the 6B default pencil brush. We will start by choosing the slash 6B pencil. It's perfect for sketches, and also we will choose some kind of dark color, whatever, can be black or gray or dark brown, whatever you like. As you can see, this brush is extremely smooth, it has a lot of streamline, and it's basically perfect for sketches as it's very forgiving. So when we open up the layers panel, we see that there is one layer where we're going to work, and there is a background enabled, and the background color is white. We will start with creating the rough sketch. We will kind of plan out where everything goes, and then we will go from there and refine it. So I start drawing the head of the witch with very light movement. Her face is going to be turned slightly to the side, so I want to make sure I consider that. And then I draw the middle line to define where my eyes and the nose and the mouth will go. So as you can see, my lines are barely visible because I'm not pressing the pencil against the iPad too much, just to make sure that the sketch is very rough, that the lines are quite forgiving. And then I proceed to mapping out where her facial features will be. So I would say the lower the cuter, so we put the eyes very low on the face to make sure she is kind and lovely and cute looking. Then I proceed straight to hair and give her a little fringe and shoulder length hair. So for this character, her hair and her witch hat are going to be the defining elements, so I kind of want them to stand out. Maybe for now in this rough sketch it's not visible, but I will definitely make sure I do it in the more refined sketch. So the next step would be our witch hat. So since we want it to stand out, we have to make it quite huge. So even though it's a witch, I want to keep her quite friendly and cute. As mentioned, this is a children's book illustration, so I will avoid any type of pointy edges, and even the top of her head is going to be nice and rounded. Okay, so I think this is fine for now, even though it looks a little bit off. We don't have to go into much details, so don't worry about how this sketch looks like. Then I will basically color in the eyes of my character, as they are also the defining element because they are taking most of the space on her face. I want them to be quite visible and distinct. You can add whatever the elements you consider to be important for the face of your character, and then we will proceed with the rest of the sketch. Since this is our first sketch, we're not sure how the things are going to look like in the final version of the illustration, so it's okay to kind of go back and forth and fix some elements, add something. So at this point I realized I want her hair to be bushier, so I've added a couple of layers to that, and I want them to kind of be shoulder length and cover some part of her neck. Also, the hat is going to be sitting a little bit lower, so kind of more realistic, let's say, and not on the top of her head, but rather her head is going to be inside. Once I'm happy with it, I can proceed to the neck and the rest of the body. So now comes the most challenging part, for me at least. If you're experienced with drawing the anatomy of a human body, I think you won't have any issues with that. I'm basically starting with these simple geometric shapes and forms in order to visualize her body. I will start with shoulders, so I'm going to create two basically ovals for that. Then come the arms and her torso. Since we're aiming for a cute style, keep in mind that her body is going to be smaller than her head. So I already have an idea of what her dress is going to look like, so just kind of not to forget, I already added the color to her attire. And then I'll proceed to drawing her forearms and the rest of her body. When it comes to the pose of my witch, I imagine her sitting kind of sideways on the broomstick and her legs dangling in the air and basically her flying somewhere. So this is exactly what I will try to convey. So I will proceed to drawing the legs and then the broomstick underneath her, just to kind of imagine how this is going to look like at the end. Then let's proceed to creating the broom. For this, I highly recommend looking up some references on the internet just to kind of have some idea of how the broom actually looks like. As for this broom, this was strictly from my imagination, how I would imagine the broom looks like. And at the end of this video, I regretted it because I couldn't add any type of details. And now let's proceed with creating the rest of her attire. I want my witch to have the dress with the cape, so this is exactly what I'm doing here, trying to basically outline where this cape would go, how it would move in the wind. By creating these kind of curves and not just straight lines, we're making our illustration more dynamic, which I think is great. I also drew the belt on her dress around the waistline, and also the dress is going to be kind of laying down on her knees as it is knee length, and also I gave her the little boots. So basically by looking at your sketch, you're going to kind of see what is missing, what is a bit off, what can be fixed for now. And at this point I decided to fix the head, as it is kind of too big and the top of the head is not having any type of shape which I like. So I removed the whole top part and I drew that from the beginning. This time maybe using a bit more refined lines and a bit more details. So here's the process. Okay, so our first and rough sketch is almost done. At this point I'm going over some of the lines once again, and I'm kind of refining them and also maybe adding more because their number, so the number of lines is going to decrease significantly with each and every next sketch. At this point it's also kind of important to make sure the proportions of our character are just the way we want them to be, because it's going to be significantly harder to change them in the future once we are moving towards our refined sketch. So when I'm looking at this sketch, the head is seriously off, so I'm going to try to fix it. Let's go to the adjustments panel and choose the function liquify and then the option push. So I'm kind of pushing this head a bit to try to center a little bit better, but you have to be careful not to push the body of the character since it's on the same layer. Great, so I think we're done. Let's go to the layers panel and rename our sketch to something like rough sketch or sketch number 1. Then let's change the blend mode to multiply by pressing that little N letter and reduce the opacity so that our sketch is barely visible. Then proceed to creating the new layer and move it under our rough sketch. Then I'm choosing the orange color, which is going to contrast very well with the dark color of our rough sketch, and then I am ready to refine it. At this point I realized that I wanted to move her facial features a bit down to the bottom of the face, so I'm going to choose the selection tool with the freehand option activated. After outlining the elements which I want to move, I have activated the transform tool and moved it a bit towards the bottom of the face. Same goes with the head. I have outlined it as well, and with the transform tool moved it a bit towards the middle of her head. Unless you're already coloring in your illustration, it's never too late to make some kind of adjustments and changes according to your needs. So once I'm done with that, I just reduce the opacity once again and make sure that I'm working on the correct layer, on the new layer, and then with the orange color, I'm kind of outlining and trying to create as few lines as possible. I do not attempt it to be my final and most refined sketch, so it's also kind of okay to experiment, move some elements around, but still I don't want it to be as dirty as my first one. So I'm going to fast forward through this part as I am not planning to add any new significant elements to my illustration. I'm just trying to attempt to make it a little bit cleaner. So enjoy! As you proceed to drawing your character, you will kind of gain more understanding of how you want it to look like. So some things may have to be increased in size and some of them have to be smaller than they actually are. So feel free to do that with the combination of the selection and transform tools. Once you're done with your second sketch and your lines are a bit more refined, we are ready to proceed with our final one. Create a new layer and outline the previous sketch with as little lines as possible. Ideally, it would be just one line so that we don't have any difficulties when coloring in our illustration. Take as much time as you need to create those perfect lines, but do not forget that modifications and adjustments are possible at this stage as well. Once we're done, I'm basically merging all the elements of our final sketch, if there are any, merging them into one layer. And after that, I am choosing the transform tool in the upper menu and flipping my sketch horizontally. This will allow us to basically view our sketch with new outlook or with new eyes, if that makes sense. We've been working on the sketch for quite a long time, so if there's something wrong with proportions or something looks funny, we wouldn't necessarily notice it. And now that we have flipped our sketch horizontally, we will be able to kind of pinpoint those elements which look a bit off and correct them before proceeding to coloring. Once you're done, flip it back to the way it was and proceed to the layers panel. I'm usually removing all the rough and basically previous sketches and just leaving our final sketch there to keep my layers kind of clean. I've renamed the layer. I'm usually not doing that, but for the sake of this video, I'm keeping all the layers clean. I have renamed it. So as you can see, our final sketch is kind of done and we can proceed with the colors. Some final adjustments before that step. We are going to the layers panel and changing the blend mode to multiply. I'm doing that so that the sketch lines are visible under the colored elements. Create the new layer and move it under the sketch. Remember that the sketch has to always stay on top in order to be visible. So I usually start coloring the character's body as the first step. Therefore, I will open up the color palette. You can view it in this compact view, but also as cards. So in this case, for our face and body, I'm going to choose this red color. I would be more inclined to call it light pink, but anyways, let us open the brushes panel and choose the 6B pencil. If you haven't worked with this pencil before, try it out. Just draw some lines and see how it behaves. I would say that the feel is very close to the actual pencil, so this is going to give us a great amount of texture and also the feeling of the children's book illustration. So just following the lines of our sketch, I'm kind of outlining where the color should go. So I'm pretty much outlining the face once again. And for this illustration, I'm not going to use this fill function, so this color drop function, that much, because it's not going to give us the amount of texture we want. So we want some spaces to be kind of blank in order to have this pencil illustration effect. You can also kind of do it vice versa, so fill it in with the color drop tool and then erase some of the areas with the 6B eraser. However, I really like to do it manually and it kind of relaxes me. It's like a coloring book page, so I really enjoy this process. So when it comes to coloring your illustration, you have to be very smart and kind of plan out what elements you want to be on the same layer and what elements you definitely don't want to be on the same layer. So in my cases, if there are no overlapping elements, I am keeping them on the same layer, kind of. And if there are some layers which are really close together, I'm definitely creating the new layer to draw them there. In case of this illustration, I'm keeping the face, the hands, and the legs on the same layer as they are not overlapping. It's also a good idea to decrease the size of your brush whenever you're coloring in the smaller elements. This is going to give you a bit more precision and definition, so we definitely want those little hands to be visible and not blurred. Of course, we also don't want to color in the whole arm, for example, because it's not going to be visible anyways, because the sleeves of the dress are long, so only the elements which are visible on the illustration are going to be colored in, just to save time, obviously. I always struggle with organizing my layers, so this time I might actually attempt to rename all of them. Let's see if I keep it up until the end of this video. I will then proceed to creating the new layer and moving it under the face, because this is exactly where I want the neck to be. So in creating layers, you have to think about what you want to be on top and what underneath certain elements. In this case, the neck is definitely under the face because I want to create some shadows there. The next layer is meant for the hair. I want it to be on top of my face, covering it. When it comes to the hair, I have chosen this darker purple color and then proceeded to coloring in the hair. In order to save some time on the eyebrows, once one of my eyebrows was ready, I have chosen the selection tool, outlined the eyebrow, swiped down with 3 fingers and duplicated it, moved it to where the left eyebrow should be, and actually flipped it horizontally to mirror the right eyebrow. I'm using this method quite a lot if I want to save time. However, remember that the duplicated object is going to be of a bit worse quality than the original one since we're working in the raster illustration. So in order to avoid those blurry pixels, I'm going to outline this duplicated eyebrow a little bit. So let's rename that layer and actually go back to the one with the hair and actually add a couple of strands of hair which are kind of moving around in the wind. So basically the more hairs, individual hairs you're going to add, the messier our hairstyle can seem. So I would be careful with that. Of course, if you want to convey that your character is kind of childish, messy, loves running around, you can add more. Let's create another layer and we're going to depict the hair on the back of the head of our character. When it comes to the color, we will choose the color picker and go a bit darker than our original hair shade. Besides, we definitely want this layer to be behind both face and the main hair layer. The darker color will obviously convey the fact that this hair is kind of in the shadows. Once it's done and the layer is renamed, we can create another one, and this time let us focus on the clothes. We will start with the hat, and for that we will choose the brighter purple color and start coloring just like before. Both front and the top part of the hat are going to be located on the same layer. However, we will create a separate layer for the area under the hat. Logically, this area is going to be located behind the hair, the face, and basically rest of the elements. Once it's done, rename your layers in order to keep track of them, and then let's create another layer which is going to be on top of our hat. This time we're going to choose this darker orange color and give our witch hat this type of belt. I wouldn't know how to call it, but it's pretty distinct feature of the witch hat, and it is going to be obviously located on the layer on top of our hat. As you could see, I'm keeping all the hat elements in one group, so I basically swiped right on them and then grouped them in order to be able to hide and unhide them in one group and not having to do it individually. On another layer on top of the belt, I'm going to create this kind of buckle with a bit lighter orange color. The more kind of small details our illustration is going to have, the more interesting it's going to be for the viewers, so you can definitely experiment with certain details. So let's proceed with another big part of our illustration, the dress of the character. I'm starting with one layer, which is the color. I want to keep it separate from other layers for now because I definitely want to create some shadows underneath the color, so this will be useful for the future. The second layer will be the sleeves, and the third layer will be the cape and kind of the main part of the dress. It's definitely better to have more layers at the beginning and then merge them later on in the process than having one layer with all the elements in it and then having to cut them out, basically. It would be pretty much impossible. Sometimes I make a mistake of working on one layer and having two different overlapping elements on it, so unfortunately I have to start from the beginning. Once the color is ready and renamed, we can proceed to the sleeves. They're going to be basically under the color and on a separate layer as mentioned. So rename the sleeves layer and create another one below it. Here we're going to depict the main part of the dress and the cape. create another layer below the main part of the cape. We're going to show what's kind of under the cape, so the fabric under it. It's in the shadows, so we have chosen the same color as under our hat, and we're basically going to depict it. I want to create a bit of dimension behind the legs of the character, so I'm going to move this under the cape layer behind the legs so I can color that area easily. And on the same layer as the main part of the dress and the cape, I'm going to color in the boots with the same color as the dress and basically the hat as well. I like to keep the color palette of my illustrations minimalistic. First of all, this is going to simplify our life quite a bit. So as you can see here, the hat, the dress and the boots are all the same color, so there's literally nothing to think twice about. But also it allows us to create the clean and kind of professional design. So I haven't chosen the color of my broom before, so I'll do that now. I think I'll go with this grayish color, and I'm going to add it to the color palette. And the broom is obviously going to be at the bottom of our layers, so pretty much behind everything. So when it comes to the broom, I will create 2 layers. First layer is going to be the pole of the broom, and the second one the brush at the end of the pole. Besides, I'm choosing a slightly darker color for the brush. So I'm swiping right on both layers of the broom and grouping them together, renaming the group so that it is also nice and handy in case we want to create some additional layers in our group. Now we can focus a bit on the smaller elements of the illustration, and I really like starting with the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer on top of the face and choose this creamy white color. So the eye is our typical perfect circle, so I'm going to create a circle, and without lifting the pencil off the screen, I'm going to tap with my finger on the iPad and create a perfect circle. We don't need any texture in the eyes, so we're going to use the color drop and drop this white color in the middle. As you may know, the color filling is not perfect, so I have to go over the edges of the eye once again to make it look better. I'm drawing the second eye on the same layer, so basically some kind of circle, and then without lifting the pencil, tap on the screen and fill the eye. As you can see, when you're dragging the pencil across the screen, it basically adjusts the extent to which the element is going to be filled in. So I kind of adjust to the maximum level without allowing the color to overflow. I'm renaming the layer with the eyes and creating a new layer on top of it. I'm actually going to make it a clipping mask, which means that whatever I draw on the clipping mask is not going to go beyond this white eye area. I'm closing the shape in order for color not to overflow, and I'm filling it in with this lighter purple color. Same goes with the second eye. I'm outlining it, closing the shape, and then dropping the color. When it comes to the pupils, I'm creating the new layer on top of the previous one, also making it a clipping mask, and then choosing the color with the eyedropper tool, and the color is going to be darker purple, so the one from the back of the head. To keep my layers organized, I'm swiping all the eye layers to the right and grouping them. I'll rename them as eyes, and then I can proceed with other elements. Since we're currently working with the face, let us create the mouth of our character. I'm choosing this pink-red color, very nice and cute, and I'm outlining the mouth from my sketch. In order to create the teeth, I'm going to add another layer on top of the mouth and make it a clipping mask. Choose the creamy white color from our eyes and add the teeth. Let's create another layer below the teeth but on the main mouth area, and change the blend mode to multiply. Using the eyedropper tool, I'm going to pick this pink color and then create the tongue. After doing that, I will organize the layers once again and actually group all the mouth layers together. Since all the main elements are already colored in, we're going to proceed to adding a bit more details. At this point, you can start with whatever you want. I have decided to give the character some eyelashes. The easiest way to do that would be to create the layer behind the whole eye and then create the eyelashes, but I realized that a bit later on. Using this bright pink color, I'm creating the nose of my character. As you can see, it's very minimalistic, and yeah, at this point and in this style, it doesn't have to be realistic at all. You can toggle the visibility of the sketch layer in order to better understand how your art will look like at the end. As the next step, I'm going to add some details, and the first element would be the belt of the dress. This is going to be the same color as the one on the head. So I'll just add a new layer below the sleeves but on top of the dress and create the belt there. On the new layer on top of the belt, I'm going to create this belt buckle with the brighter or lighter orange color. Using the darker purple color, I will add the shoelaces on the boots. It's time to add some lines to our illustration, so I will go into the layers panel and add a new layer on top of the head buckle. After choosing this darker orange color, I will create this kind of inner square in the buckle. Same goes for the buckle on the dress, but it would actually make sense to make this new layer a clipping mask for this inner rectangle not to go outside of the buckle. I will then create a new layer on top of our hair, make it a clipping mask, and also change the blend mode to multiply. I realized that I forgot to change the color and it is now orange and should be the same color as our hair. But anyways, we're going to make these kind of strokes in order to create the shadows. Create a new clipping mask on top of the eyebrows, change the blend mode to multiply, and add some lines to the eyebrows as well. Create a new layer on top of our cape and main part of the dress. Change the blending mode to multiply and make it a clipping mask as well. By adding just a couple of lines, we're going to visualize that our clothes have some folds. I do not strive to create the realistic visualization, but rather an illustration, so I'm not going to add lines everywhere they are supposed to be. Think about where the lines are absolutely crucial for the understanding of how the clothes fit your character. I've enabled the sketch underneath because we've already kind of thought of these lines, so I'm just going to basically trace them. At some point, you might realize that the placement of the layers is not perfect, so here I've noticed that the sleeves were on top of the knees actually, so I removed that part of the sleeves which was overlapping so that we can clearly see the knees of the girl. There's no problem when it comes to erasing some parts of the layers. It would be definitely worse if we would place two overlapping elements on the same layer and then we wouldn't be able to kind of erase them. But at this point we keep it separate so that we can fix those mistakes as we go. I've created another clipping mask on top of the layers and changed the blending mode to multiply just like before, and now we're going to create some folds on the sleeves. After adding the lines to the sleeves, I'm going to actually proceed with adding shadows to my illustration. So let's start with the face, hands, and the legs. So let's create a layer on top of it. We'll make it a clipping mask and a multiply blend mode. Pick the actual color of the skin, so this light pink, and create the shadows where they will be most prominent. I usually start with the forehead where the hair would give quite a lot of shadow, and then I want to give some definition to the eyes. so I will kind of create an eyelid, but not really, so I'm using the shadows in this case. Don't worry about the strength of the shadow, we are going to adjust the opacity of that layer in a minute. Let's add just a little bit of shadow on the cheeks and on the bottom part of the face. Once it's done, let's reduce the opacity of the shadows layer to around 50 or 45%, whatever fits your taste. Let's rename that layer and proceed to adding shadows to the other parts of the body. The next part is the neck, so I'm going to create a new layer on top of the neck. As usually, clipping mask and multiply blend mode. Using the same color, we're going to create this type of shadow, which is casted by the face of the girl. Easy peasy, just like that, and reduce the opacity to around 50% as well. So next in line are the hands and the legs. Since they are on the same layer as the face, I'm going to just rename this layer as body shadows, and I will not create the separate one for the shadows on these body parts. So once again, I'm not going to add shadows everywhere they're supposed to be, just let's say on the main elements. The next little element I would like to add is a bit of shine in her eyes, so I'm going to create a new layer on top of the pupils, and I will choose this white color. Then I will proceed to adding a bit of the highlight. To be honest, this is one of my favorite parts, even though it's such a little element, but it totally changes the mood of the whole illustration and makes it a little bit more magical and cute. The next crucial element of my illustrations are the rosy cheeks. So I'm going to create the cheeks on the same layer as the nose. They are not going to overlap, so that's fine. I will choose the same color as the inside of the mouth, so a very nice and sweet pink color. Just make sure that the layer is under the eyes. This will make it very easy to create this nice blush. If you feel like, you can add a little bit of the blush around the face, so between the eyes, on the nose for example, or actually give her the freckles, which are also quite cute. Okay, so after finishing with the pleasant part, let's proceed to adding shadows and some more lines so that we can finish up her outfit. So I think we will go ahead and add the shadows on her head. So once again, create a new layer on top of the head and make it a clipping mask and the multiply blend mode. Whenever I'm trying to recreate this pencil effect in my illustrations, I like to tilt the Apple Pencil just a bit. When doing the shadows, it provides a bit more texture, which I think is also very lovely. Once we're done with that, we can open this layer up and reduce the opacity so that the shadows are not so dark. To add even more texture and actually make our shadows less strong, we're going to choose the eraser tool with the same 6B pencil and erase some part of it. Let's add a little bit more dimension to the bottom of the hat and create a little line of the shadow here as well. The next element I want to focus on is the buckle on the hat, so I'm going to merge the two layers and add the shadow to them as well. Something like that would be enough, and then we reduce the opacity of the layer. I want to show the shadow under the collar, so I'm going to go to the layer with the main part of the dress and actually create another layer on top of it. Once again, this is going to be clipping mask and the blend mode is multiply, just like before. I'm working with the color of the dress and creating shadow under the collar. You don't have to be super precise with that. We can always choose the eraser tool and make our lines more defined. Let's also add a little bit of shadow next to the belt to add more definition, and then at the bottom of the dress. Let's reduce the opacity and move to the color itself. So I'm going to create, actually find the color layer and create the new layer on top of it with the same settings. So the clipping mask and the multiply. And I'll add some shadow casted by the head and then under the neck. Let us find the layer with the shadows on the dress and actually clean up those shadows under the color a little bit. I will then do the same thing with the sleeves, so create a new layer on top of it with the multiply blend mode and add a little bit of the dimension. So we're almost done creating shadows on the outfit of our character. We will then proceed with the cape, and this is the same layer as we were working on before, so the one on top of the cape. So after that I have cleaned up the layers just a little bit, renamed them. For example, this one with the cape lines, I also reduced its opacity and renamed it. Let us now go to the layer with the sleeves lines. We have created it previously. I will reduce its opacity just a little bit, and then I will drag this layer to the top of our outfit. So this layer is going to be the first one when it comes to the clothes of our characters. And on this layer I'm going to create more lines, so the outline for certain elements where it's absolutely necessary. So for example, right here on the collar, also on the sleeves, so that we can kind of see where the main part of the dress ends and where the sleeves begin. We kind of did that with the help of the shadows, but it's definitely easier to create the outline and convey what we want to show our viewers. I renamed that layer to dress lines, and then let's proceed with the belt. I'm going to merge the layers with the belt buckle into one. Create a new layer on top of it, make it a clipping mask, and then choose this orange color. Don't forget to make it multiply as well as a blending mode, and then just give it a little bit of the shadow. So this orange might be a little bit too light, so I chose the darker version of the orange and it works much better. Let's reduce the opacity and work on the main part of the belt. Once again, clipping mask with the blending mode multiply and give it a little bit of the shadow. So now let's work on the last two elements, the boots of the character and the broom she's sitting on. So we will add some shadows to the soles of the boots, and then we can proceed with the broom. So let's find our group with the broom layers. Create a new layer just above everything and make it a clipping mask, and also give it a multiply blending mode. We can already kind of reduce the opacity and choose the color of the brush and draw some, let's say, lines and give this brush a little bit of the dimension. As mentioned, I did not look for references, and that was the mistake because it took me quite some time to actually make this broom work. Then I created another layer on top of that actual broomstick and also added a little bit of texture, shadows and lines to it. So now create a new layer on top of everything. The blending mode is add. We will be creating our highlights right now, so you can choose this syrup default brush. I'm actually going to be working with the brush of Lisa Bardot, which I've purchased online. The brush is called Pointy Round from the gouache set. Using our orange color, we're going to create highlights. So we will start with the head, because this is kind of the first thing which is facing our light source, which is, let's assume, in the right upper corner of our canvas. Using very light motion, I'm kind of creating the shine on the buckle of the head, and then on the other parts it might be easier to disable the background color so that you can see where you place your highlights. I do encourage you to experiment with the brush you're using for this step. Try the hard ink bleed brush from the artistic set. This is also default, or the actual 6B pencil, or the slash version of it. It will work just as well. Then I will proceed to adding highlights on the hair, on the bottom part of the face. I think it would look really, really nice. And as the last step, we will add a couple of highlights to the broom, the dress, and the boots. So our illustration is ready. The last thing I'm gonna do is go to the layers panel and change the color of the background. I want to show that it's nighttime, so I think a darker color will work very well. You can continue working on this background, maybe add a couple of stars or a full moon. At this point, I want to keep it minimalistic, and I will leave it at that. So good job everyone who stayed until the end. If you want to share the results of your work, feel free to do so and send your illustrations to my email address. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.